from the missing to the stars. It is time to bring in our resident Timbit, little Timmy Seanor, and the UFO Report.
Nobody's gonna know.
They're gonna know.
It's always good to have you here, little Timmy Seanor. It's been a wild week and a wild month so far, in the past couple of weeks at least. And, you know, it's always good to share some UFO news with you. I mean, I'm still getting people coming up. Where's Tim Seanor been? Where's he been hiding?
Well, I'm here. I've just been nose to the grindstone and doing work for you guys, trying to get my head wrapped around what this UAP thing is all about. But I've got a few stories for you. A couple of things are going on, and you and I really never talked about the hearings because I was actually mid-travel on the 26th when this took place. So maybe we could just kind of break down those major takeaways and see if we can figure out exactly what might be to come.
Hey, we could go wherever you want, my man. Whatever you want to speak about, people are listening to you because they love you, Tim. You know, after staring on YouTube at my face for radio for a while, all of a sudden they see a handsome mug like yours come on out, and they're like, yep, I'm in.
Stop
So,
it.
what did your take? I mean, looking back on the hearings and the incredible testimony by David Grush, who I think stole the entire show again. All right, I didn't expect him to break down as much as he did over that period. What was your take looking back on it?
I thought it was incredibly profound and well timed, and he had a ton of support. It was great to see filmmaker Jeremy Corbell and, of course, George Knapp, along with the lawyer that was representing David Grush right there behind him while he was speaking. I thought that lended a lot of credibility and support. So when, he was able to actually lay down some of that information, even if he had to say at some points that some of that information had to be discussed in a skiff privately, I think that a lot of the topics that needed to be covered still were. And so a few of the big takeaways I'd love to cover with you. For example, the first one, the claims of a cover-up, right? So the U.S. government concluded and conducted a multi-decade program which collected and attempted to reverse engineer crashed UFOs. And so according to David Grush, he led an analysis of an unexplained anomalous phenomenon within U.S. Department of Defense agency until 2023, and claimed he had been denied access to secret government UFO programs. He said that he faced very brutal, quote, retaliation as a result of his allegations. And he claimed that he had knowledge of people who had been harmed or injured in the course of government efforts to conceal the information. So that's obviously some hints of violence. And then Congressman Tim Burchett asked Rush if he had any personal knowledge of people who had been harmed or injured in efforts to cover up or conceal extraterrestrial technology. And of course, we know Grush replied yes. And so Burchett asked if he had heard of anyone being murdered. The former intelligence official answered, I directed people with that knowledge to the appropriate authorities. Some pretty heavy-duty claims. And right off the bat, do you have any response to that? Personally, that was kind of some big stuff for me. I can go through my list, but I'd love to get your take on that one because that's a biggie.
Well, you know what? The big thing for me isn't so much about the testimony. It is about the idea that he brought up what we had all suspected in the UFO community, which is that people have been hurt and or lost their lives due to this topic, one way or another. And he was pointing the finger directly at the alphabet agencies and the military for taking care of business, if we could use that term for this. And it's an ugly thing because, like I said last week, this is, it reminds me of, do you remember the song Right Now by Van Halen back in 1991? Okay.
Sure.
On their video, they had one of the most powerful statements on that video, which said, right now, your government is doing what you only thought other governments did, or something along those lines. That's exactly what this is. Okay. We're talking the United States of America, man.
Yeah,
We're not supposed to take out our own.
that's
Okay.
right.
I'm
That's
not
right.
American, but I'm using we because 90% of our audience is in the US. Okay. And I look at that as, when we look at things like that, that's what China does. That's what Iran does. That's what North Korea does. That's what Syria does. Okay. That's what, a lot of these uh, rogue nations do. This is what, ISIS does. This is what the Taliban do, not the American government. And yet here we are watching David Grush, who many are calling a patriot, coming out and talking, ripping that dirty blanket off and saying, look what's underneath the covers. That's powerful.
Yeah.
And many of those politicians that sat in on that, they were jawstruck.
Yeah, I think that that was definitely a moment that you saw a ripple go across the room when that realization came across the people in that room. And um using violence or insinuating murder to ensure secrecy on this topic is pretty heavy. And so I thought that that was a pretty big deal. And then we get into the Pentagon denials, the fact that the Pentagon denied Grush's claims of the cover up rather than coming forward with support. In a statement, a Defense Department spokesman said investigators had not discovered, quote, any verifiable information to substantiate the claims that any programs regarding the possession of or reverse engineering of extraterrestrial materials have existed in the past or exist currently. Massive denial from the Pentagon. So that was a pretty big takeaway from this whole uh, program that was put forward to supposedly bring truth forward. And then other witnesses and other claims, including David Fravor, former Navy commander, who recalled seeing a strange object in the sky while on a training mission in 2004. And of course, Ryan Graves, a retired Navy pilot who has since founded the Americans for Safe Aerospace, a UAP nonprofit that claimed that he saw a UAP off the Atlantic coast, quote, every day for at least a couple years. So some major big statements coming from other witnesses, not just whistleblowers. So firsthand witnesses there. And so obviously there are some doubts that linger. Excuse me. And a lot of people have come forward, journalists and people in politics coming forward on both sides of this. But now we know that is yet legislation to come. So, in his closing remarks, Republican Congressman Glenn Grothman described the hearings as, quote, illuminating, and said he believed legislation would follow. So, he's the chair of the House Subcommittee on National Security and the Border and Foreign Affairs. And he said, quote, obviously, I think several of us are going to look forward to getting some answers in a more confidential setting. I assume some legislation will come out of this. And so we can also assume that. And I think that that is a massive takeaway to see that there will be some changes to come in how lawmakers decide to look at this topic and consider it as a reality and know that these things are in our airspace and need to be considered when we're looking into it a little bit deeper and, potentially put some more dollars towards researching it. I think that is definitely what this boils down to, is that it needs more research. And obviously it is that time.
It is that time, and we're going to see where this goes. I mean, what we need now, in my opinion, is we need a couple more whistleblowers to take some of that pressure off of David Grush. Now, why would they? I don't know. Would it be a smart move by them? Well, it'd be a smart move for the public to have them come out, and it would be smart for David Grush to applaud them coming out for telling their amazing stories regarding what they know. Okay. But they have to be people who can advance David Grush's speech. Okay. Because remember, Grush never saw any UFOs, he never saw any aliens. Those stories are secondhand. Can you imagine if all of a sudden we are getting stories from people who have seen it firsthand, who are protected under the Whistleblowers Act? That's what we need. We need one or two of those at minimum to come out and talk about this if they exist. Okay. We can only hope. We can only hope. But I mean, your thoughts. Do you think that would take a lot of pressure off of Grush?
Absolutely. And I think we're going to see a lot more people coming out of the woodwork in support. For example, recently in the Hill, uh, Rear Admiral Tim Gallagher came forward and posted his statements in support of the witnesses that came forward, calling them brave and also supporting a lot of the information that was brought forward. And so, as a retired Navy flag officer, he was able to attest the integrity and authenticity of the two pilots who testified, retired Commander David Fravor and Ryan Graves, and he served on 3 aircraft carriers. And he can count many naval aviators that consider them close friends. And so he says that these two witnesses are the real deal. And he says, so is David Grush. As a Navy information warfare officer, he says he closely worked with the intelligence community and David Grush's former command, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. So he says in a quote, I too have been read into the special access programs, and I understand how Department of Defense classification systems and authorities work. His testimony is 100% credible. So we're definitely going to see more people like this coming forward to support that, and potentially some more firsthand witnesses, because I think that that is going to hold as much weight as anything at this point. So I'm pretty excited about it. This is great, support coming forward, and we need more of it.
What do you think of what random guy posted in the chat room here just a couple of minutes ago regarding Peter Thiel, who is allegedly the money backer for Enigma Labs, putting in a huge infusion through Palantir, who is a defense contractor for the computers of the Department of Defense, in a redistribution contract? Do you think that money is going to funnel its way to Enigma Labs to be the program of the future?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. If you're seeing a support there, that means that there's collaboration. I have my Enigma 3 shirt on tonight. This is actually uh, studio gear that we ended up renting out in Salt Lake. But coincidentally, yeah, that must have triggered some Enigma fans out there. But yeah, absolutely. You can see that kind of collaboration taking place. I'm unaware of that, so I would love to know more. But anytime you see that kind of thing happening, it's a big flag as to what their abilities are, or what they're looking into, or the kind of collaborations they're hoping to gain out of something like that.
I think we're going to see more posturing, and that's what's going to happen. We're going to see more posturing. We're going to see a lot more of these types of situations happen. And so it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, my friend. It really is. And I don't know about you, but I'm looking forward to it. And I hope you are too. We got 2 minutes to go here before we got to go to break. at the bottom of the hour. Little Timmy Seanor is here with the UFO report. And apparently, there's some pilots. We're seeing some very strange things in Arizona. Warm us up for the next half hour.
Yeah, U.S. fighter jets are having worrisome aerial encounters in Arizona's restricted air combat training areas. And that fits with a broader trend that we've seen in that area as far back as the Phoenix Lights and probably even earlier. So, encounters with small unidentified objects, sometimes in swarm like groups, as many as 8, and the sightings of other objects, including some characterized as drones, flying at altitudes of up to 36,000 feet and as fast as Mach 0.75. And so another apparent small drone actually hitting the canopy of an F 16 Viper caused damage. And these incidents and more all occurred in and or around various military air combat training ranges in Arizona since January of 2020. And so we're going to look deeply into this with a cool report that we got from the War Zone and the Drive. And we're going to dig a little deeper into this because some of it's drones, but some of it might not be. And it's moving at incredible rates. And Dave, sometimes they're in swarms, which is really interesting because typically drones are in a pack of maybe 6 to 8, but these are dozens. And they're coming from really high altitudes down to the ground at extreme speeds. Typical drones don't move like that. And so we're going to dig a little deeper, and I'm excited to get your response.
I look forward to it, Little Timmy Seanor, as I do every time you were on Spaced Out Radio tonight. It is pretty fantastic when we could bring this UFO news to you and all of us out there in UFO land. The UFO report with Tim Seanor continues with UFOs over Arizona being chased by fighter pilots. Let's bring this thing home when we return on the mighty SOR. There we go. We got some serious RG sightings in the chat room tonight. Random guy.
I miss that smile. That guy.
Yeah. Yeah, he's all right.
You want to see a pretty picture?
I do. Hold on, let me bring it up here.
Let's see if I can get that to focus a little bit.
It is
better.
focused.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Pretty cool stuff.
Beautiful. 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 Beautiful.
What do you think that is? That little thing. Captured a lens flare. It looks bizarre though.
That is bizarre. I know that lighting.
You do know that lighting.
Totally know that lighting. Stolen from Vancouver. No, I'm teasing.
It's really hard to. Let's see if I can zoom in on this one. Because it's actually. No, it really doesn't want to. It's kind of a diamond. Don't know what it is, but it's a diamond.
Beauty.
Beauty.
Beauty. All right. I'm going to find. Let's see here. Let's go back here. Close that out. Very cool. All right.
Oh, Canada, how cold you are at night.
Oh, come on. It
Dude.
wasn't cold at all. It wasn't. Oh, maybe the second night was a little chilly. Okay.
This
The
guy.
second night was a little chilly. But I mean, overall, it was good.
No doors, no roof. Let's roll.
What do you mean there was no doors? The doors were on.
You know who has a sign up in downtown Salt Lake? Billboard.
Brandon?
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. Free advertising for him. If you need a building.
Phone Brandon.
Could see that from my hotel window. I had a chuckle. It's also a hint where we were.
Mm-hmm. I know.
You know, you guys have so many deer in your yard. That is the coolest thing. They're just chilling.
You like the deer in my yard.
Yeah, you guys have a feeding frenzy going on in your backyard.
Yeah. That is true.
Dave's yard is beautiful.
Yeah, except my lawnmower being broken. That bugs me.
You have 2 lawnmowers right there.
Yeah, they don't eat the grass very well.
It's good stuff.
All right. Gotta find something here. All right. Thank you to our super channelers. Hatrix for Random Guy and W. Decker, Deb, Larry, Izzy Stradlin, Baba, Vash the Impaler, Pam H, and Cat Chaser. Very much appreciate the love and support. And here we go with the next half hour of the UFO Report.
Put yourself back on screen.
Here we go with the final half hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. My name is Dave Scott. We very much appreciate earning your listening ears wherever you are on this beautiful planet we call Earth. If you've missed most of this show or others, check out our free archives by going to youtube.com/Spaced Out Radio. Do old Davey the favor, hit that subscribe button. Our website, spacedoutradio.com. We have a plethora of features for you. Rock out to Bumblefoot, read the news wire, check out our swag as well. Follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio, Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show, and on TikTok at Spaced Out Radio. We continue with the UFO Report. Little Timmy Seanor is back, and we're talking aliens in Arizona. What's going on with these flying objects there, Timmy?
Well, there have been a number of encounters between military aircraft and what are described as groups of craft flying together in the past 3 years or so in this specific part of the U.S. For instance, back in the 29th of 2021 of March, 2 pilots flying F-35s in the vicinity of Buckeye, Arizona, made a report about 3 or 4 what they're calling UAS or unmanned aerial systems off the right side. and that was about 17,000 feet, according to the FAA. And then back on April 22nd of 2022, another F-35 pilot reported 8 silver UAS at an altitude of between 16,000 and 20,000 feet. So they're starting to see these things pretty regularly, and it's not clear whether these were actually observed on both radar or just visually, but a lot of these incidents were being reported. And so, Dave, knowing that there's this many reports coming in, and I'd love to give some more of them just off the bat, what's your take knowing that they're coming so close and probably being now reported to Congress that they're actually having some near misses? Do you feel like this is potentially what is the big concern in Congress right now?
I think they gotta. Well, of course. I mean, anything is a safety issue. Remember, if these are ours, okay. If this technology is ours, but being hidden but tested on the United States Air Force and the U.S. military, we have to remember this, okay? And that is, you're testing it against the greatest force ever. And you're also going for budgets on a threat narrative for these. It makes great sense that if these objects are ours, that it's going to create a budget for threats on this planet. You can hide behind the UFO. You can hide behind the extraterrestrials. That's easy to do. Okay, but very few people actually know what's happening in test facilities, whether it's in the deserts of California or the deserts in Nevada or other test facilities. We don't really know what they got. We can assume, as laymen can, but we don't know really what they have. Do they have that technology to fly at hypersonic speed or way above hypersonic speed to drop from 50,000 feet down to sea level in under a second? Do we have that technology? We're not meant to know. There are probably people out there who will nod their head and say, I know. And yes, that is the reality of it. It ain't aliens, it's us. Okay? There are those people out there. And they're in the know, looking and laughing at all of us. Because we think it's little gray dudes who are running around. Now, you've had aliens, I've had aliens, random guys had aliens, you know? I mean, those of us who've had aliens, we know that there is something more to it. We just can't prove it. Okay, so if these are extraterrestrials, I think we have to look at it that way as well, Tim, and say, okay, why are they trying to stir up the crap with our fighter pilots? Are they trying to test their defenses? Are they trying to test how good they are? Are they just playing games like we would a game of chess? What's it all about?
Well, I think another example that they had from March 25th of 2021, where pilots in a pair of F-35s flying in the vicinity of Casa Grande, Arizona, which is situated between Phoenix and Tucson, reported, quote, a large white UAS. So that was at about 24,000 feet. And according to one entry in the FAA logs, quote, the object, which appeared to be stationary, was described as a small general aviation aircraft or a very large unmanned aerial system. And so there were multiple reports at that point also being picked up on radar. And some of these things actually motivate from that level up into almost space. And I think that that is when some of these reports become interesting. And they also go into a gray area into the reporting, because once it goes into space, it's in another domain and it's not necessarily under the observation of FAA. And so that's when I was wondering how they're reported and counter-reported, and does Space Force get involved, and at what point does NASA know about it? And obviously, when they're at that height, it may not be observable by our common radar. And so, for example, another sighting on December 13th of 2022, where the FAA's data says that a pilot in an F-35 flying in the eastern end of a section restricted or considered restricted airspace, and this would be within the Barry M. Goldwater range, made a report about what they described as 4 UAS, as seen below in this entry, which I'll describe. Um, Although no evasive action was taken, it was also reported by the county sheriff. And in that description, if you click on it, it says that the description from the sheriff said that this object shot up into space at incredible rates, which is incredibly interesting. And you can also say that a lot of these were observed by multiple sources. What do you think happens when the jurisdiction is both considered by FAA and then into space? Now, is that under someone else's quote unquote jurisdiction at this point, Dave, or how does that happen? And how
Oh,
is it reported? Because
I
that's pretty
don't know.
unusual.
I don't
Typical,
know.
well, typical drones don't do that, right?
Well, I agree with you. Typical drones don't do that. Okay, but once again, we don't know the technology that we have. All right, we don't know what they could do with these drones. I mean, remember, as silly as it seems, a lot of these drones are flown by video game players that have been hired by the military, especially ones in battlefields. You know, they get trained on the real thing, and to them, it's like just playing Call of Duty from the sky. I mean, if and drones are becoming so advanced now with their heights, their distances, their maneuverability, their steadiness. I mean, why couldn't it be a drone? Why couldn't these Tic Tacs or whatever be a human drone?
Well, I mean, some of these seem to move in coordination with each other. Another case here had an observation that started at 21,000 feet of a single object. And then, according to the HATR, which I believe is the record of importance here, the second observation was at 14,500 feet of approximately 8 small objects. And so the unredacted portions of this do not say that the second F-35 had to maneuver evasively in either of those instances, but both jets involved in these separate encounters with groups of objects that day were from the Air Force's 56th Fighter Wing of Luke Air Force Base and were conducting training sorties at the time. And they were unable to return to base without a further end, or I'm sorry, they were able to return to base without further incident, but they did have to divert off course, and it averted their training mission. So these things moving in coordination, doesn't that kind of tend to, I mean, at that speed, typically not drone behavior, right? I mean, we can go through these case by case, but they're often small, black, and metallic with no kind of trajectory or that normal drones would be able to take. No rotors and no propulsion of any visual kind. So that's also not typical. Um, do you have any feeling on any of this? Because typically you could assume that this could be technology of our own. However, when you see it go from land level up into space, you start to scratch your head.
Well, let me tell you this. As far as we know, and I'm going to come at this from a completely different standpoint, Tim. As far as we know, these types of interactions are not happening with the Canadian Armed Forces and the Canadian Air Force. So why is it happening to American pilots, but it is not happening to forces elsewhere that we know of? Now, in talking with Chris Rutkowski, who gets a lot of the reports from the Department of National Defense up here in Canada, these reports of these extreme close encounters are not taking place. And remember, the Department of National Defense came out and said there is zero threat narrative for UFOs / UAP, whatever you want to call them, in Canadian skies. So why does this keep happening to America? Okay, well, you could say, well, America is the most powerful force with the best technology, blah, 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 blah. Okay, but other countries have air forces. Is this happening with the British Air Force? Is this happening with the Swedish Air Force, the French Air Force, the Spanish Air Force, the Australian Air Force, the Russian Air Force, the Chinese, the Japanese, the Indians? Where's theirs? Is this happening? And we don't know. We know there's been incursions, okay, like the famous one in Iran with an F-4 Phantom. We know that military has tracked them. But are these, like Ryan Graves said, when they were seeing the cubes were up there almost every day. Why is this not happening to other forces? That's what we need to know.
Oh, I think it is, Dave. I absolutely think it is. And I think it comes down to reporting. And a lot of these countries are looking to the United States to see how we handle these reports. And obviously, we're setting up things like Enigma, and Ryan Graves has his program for pilots to report to. But unless you see these independent companies perhaps coming forward with a safe way to report, it's not going to happen. And so they're still very much stigmatized in the military in other countries. So reports are limited, and we see that, and they're leaked out usually when we do see them. And of course, we have the media and how it's handled that way. So a lot of those reports get muddled and we don't see them whatsoever. And when we do get them, they're so convoluted with misinformation, we don't know it's real. So I would definitely consider the fact that Ryan Graves, as you brought up, has put together a program that's safe for pilots to report to, and other countries probably are looking to something like that to duplicate so that they can have the kind of information that's necessary to even do some research on this topic, because it is necessary for those people on the forefront that are viewing this and reporting and being able to get data on it to have a safe place to report. And so I think we'll start to see more of it, as we've seen in the past. Other countries tend to follow after the United States when they see something working. Hopefully they see these programs working for us and duplicate that and do the same.
Well, let's move on to our final topic of the night here, if you don't mind, because I think it's an interesting, fascinating topic that was in thehill.com. And that's,
Yeah,
you mentioned him earlier, Rear Admiral Tim Gallagher, okay, about whistleblowers.
I did. But you know what? I'd like to, I kind of covered that. I have a surprise story that I
Okay.
thought was really cool. Let's cover this. So in popular mechanics, there's a mysterious light that has been blinking in space for every 21 minutes for the past 35 years. And scientists have discovered a mysterious pulsing light, and they don't know what it could be. It pulses at a rate at about once every 21 minutes and has been doing so since at least 1988. And it doesn't nicely fit into the description of the pulsating space objects we know of, such as pulsars and things like that. So researchers are still trying to figure out what this object might be. Could it be some kind of communication? Could it be some kind of astral mystery that we haven't yet seen? So some things in the universe shine with a constant life-sustaining light, and some things beam with a light from other sources, and some flash in large explosions, never to be seen again. and some pulse like a ticking, or rather flashing, or just like a clock. Some energy sources in the universe hit us with a beam of light and a beam of photons, lighting up and darkening on a very set schedule. Well, there's actually a fair few types of these objects that do this, but scientists recently discovered one particular source of flashing light that has already proven especially puzzling. And so, as I described, it's now called the GPM J1839-10, and we don't know what it is. Usually, if you spot a pulsing light or a pulsing object, your first instinct would be to identify it as a pulsar. But this one is not one of these rotating neutron stars with strong magnetic fields that generate radio jets at the magnetic poles. If their poles aren't pointed directly at Earth, we only see those radio jets when they spin around it to hit us, causing an incredibly consistent pulse. Well, this isn't one of those. And in addition to that, we have no idea what it is. And so scientists are considering all kinds of new options. They think, could it be a new thing or a very rare magnetized white dwarf? It's a pretty, that's a long shot. They're also considering that it could just be an optical illusion or some kind of X-ray. But right now, researchers aren't fully ready to give up on any of these ideas, no matter how long the shot may be. But further investigations will likely be needed to determine what exactly this thing is. But it's kind of nice to know there's something out there with a big question mark on it, and it could be some kind of communication. And who knows, Dave? It could have a signal or some kind of message from someone or some people from far, far away.
Very much so. Very much so. And you know what? SETI from NASA still will say they've never found it.
You're not a fan. You're not a fan. No. I get it.
No, I'm not a fan of SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Yeah, right. Show us where it is, my man. Show us where it is. And I tell you, it'll be definitely much different than what we think actually went on. But you know what? I would be very excited for that. I really would. And you never know. It could be something that's lighting up from millions of years ago that's finally reaching us, or it could be a more powerful wow signal. The wow signal being an audio signal that was heard in space back 30 plus years ago. Geez, I guess almost 40 years ago now.
Yeah.
And it could be something that like that, except more powerful with light. I mean, what if there's another humanoid type civilization out there that has shot this particle beam of light into space, seeing who picks it up? Or maybe they've been invaded by aliens of the nefarious, malevolent kind, and that's their rescue signal, like their bat signal. Maybe they're calling for random guy. I don't know.
They miss him too.
They miss him too. Yeah, you never know. But Tim, I love that story, and that's a story we need to follow up on. Where is this coming from? We know it's going to be downplayed, even if it was extraterrestrial. I doubt it comes out. But that's one of those stories that, it's going to come and go. And in 6 months, it's going to be forgotten about until Avi Loeb Part 2 says it's alien. You never know.
Boy, follow it.
Boy, I'm saying, little Timmy Seanor, thank you so much for another great UFO report as we are on the outskirts of tonight's show. It's been great, man. What a great week to have you back and back in costume and looking pretty like Howie Mandel. The only problem is you don't have an ice cap in your hands, but it's been good, buddy. Thank you for a great show.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun. See you guys
thank
soon.
You to Paul Blake Smith, our guest. We're going to bring him back next month to talk about Eisenhower and aliens. It's going to be an absolute blast. We got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot THAL rocking in the background with Little Brother is Watching. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. Get your horns up for the guitar god himself. Special thanks to everybody listening in at home, at work, in your cars, wherever you may be. Thank you to everyone in our chat rooms tonight. YouTube, Twitch, LGAB, Facebook, Spreaker, LinkedIn, the Space Travelers Club, and on Twitter at hashtag Spaced Out Radio.
I know you're out there somewhere.
Remember, this show is copyright by Spaced Out Radio and SUR Media Ventures Limited. Thank you so much for choosing to share your evening with us, because together, my friends,
we're watching.
we own the night. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need a favor. We need you to take us home.
I know you're out there somewhere watching me.
Yes, the Woo train has docked for the night. But soon, my friends, we shall ride again. Your seats are always available. Your tickets never expire. And if you want to bring a friend, we got room for them too. Good night.